3 out of the 4 last pedals that I've done here have all been choruses of some form or another. I think it's time to go play in the dirt for a little while. You know, sometimes I plan out every aspect of these demo jams ahead of time, and sometimes I just start and then hope things fall into place. This was like a 3-second nugget that was playing in my head when I woke up the other day, so I awkwardly sang it into my phone, like you do, and it's been a whole lot of fun bringing it all together and seeing where I can fit this pedal into the mix. Wasn't hard, really. This is a dirt box, or more specifically, a saturation box. It's inspired by the Akai GX210D reel-to-reel tape machine, which is an interesting place to start, and I thought that I would start today by adding some light saturation to the drums. For that mostly clean, chimey guitar part, I use the second symmetric clipping option into a Voodoo Lab analog chorus, because you know I'm going to find a way to fit another chorus pedal into this video. Then for the second guitar, I'm using the third clipping option, which is yet another type of asymmetric clipping going into an MXR M300 reverb on the pad setting, which is an octave up, octave down shimmer type of reverb. To noodle around on that Dano, I brought up the gain all the way, I turned on all the switches, and I brought in a Volbrook Spacetime version 2 Echo. Basically, you're just seeing every pedal that I've got in the mailbox the past couple days. And then, of course, the bass. The idea of a pedal styled after a reel-to-reel tape machine, and not just for the delay aspect of it, is really interesting to me, and that's why I decided to buy this. The circuit is super simple. You can almost trace it by eyeball just by looking at the PCB, though fortunately there is a schematic online which seems to check out. At its heart, we've got this BS170 transistor with a Zener diode going back to the gate. That's our entire amplification and gain engine, and it takes us from clean boost to warm overdrive all the way up to thick distortion. The other interesting area here is this assortment of diodes. You'll notice they all go directly to ground, so that means that they're hard clipping. We start with a single 1N4001 here for an asymmetric option. Then we've got 2 diodes in a symmetric arrangement. Then option 3, indicated by this cartoon exclamation point, it looks like a symmetric arrangement, but they're actually 2 different types of diodes, a 4148 and a 5819. And the slightly different characteristics there means we're going to get all sorts of harmonics and grit out of them. And we can try to take a look at what's going on by pumping a simple sine wave in here. There we go. We can amplify it. We can add enough gain to where it starts clipping on its own. That's just transistors doing transistor things. When we engage this first switch, that's the first asymmetric option, we can see the tops of those waveforms getting cut off. That's the single diode in an asymmetric arrangement doing its job. If we turn that off and hit the second option, that's the 2 identical diodes in parallel. Let me resize this so we can actually see it. But now we can see both sides are getting affected. That's our symmetric option. And we can add more gain, and we can see the ratios of clipping to signal go up and down. That's what gives you more of that fuzz type characteristic. And finally, that third option, this looks a lot like the second symmetric option, but notice how offset it is from the 0 line here. And I'll flip back and forth a little bit so you can kind of see that in action. Having 2 different diodes in there which engage with different voltage characteristics, that's what gives us this really thick sound. And we can give it a little extra bump with these top 2 switches, but for the most part, switch 3 sets the overall clipping stage. Now, obviously, this is just a simple sine wave. It's not even worth listening to. This gets a whole lot more interesting to look at once we throw a complex instrument like, oh, I don't know, a guitar into the mix. Something worth mentioning. In reading up on this pedal, I came across this post on Reddit where someone goes, okay, yeah, this pedal is based on the preamp of an Akai reel-to-reel. Yep, knew that. But then someone below them says, hey, just an FYI, that's marketing nonsense. Lies. It's a lightly modified SHO, an SHO. That's in reference to the ZVEX Super Hard-On pedal. Another YouTube comment says essentially the same thing. This isn't based on any stage of an Akai reel-to-reel. It's a ZVEX SHO followed by a diode hard clipping and a master volume. I kind of hate the term based on because in pedals and amps and other electronics, there's a lot of common ground just in the way that things work. And it's easy to pick 2 circuits and find some commonality and go, oh, that must be based on this one. Or this is just another one of those. In the case of the Jive and the SHO, it's real easy to say, hey, look, you can just take the SHO circuit, make these small adjustments, and then you've got the front half of the Jive. Well, okay, but what you're left with here in common is basically the bare minimum required to make amplification happen. In fact, Google search for transistor amplification circuit, click the first image, and there's your whole framework right there. Chris Jupiter said that this started out as a buffer and then he just kept adding gain. Maybe he picked the BS170 because of a SHO-inspired build. Even if that's the case, it's still not as bad as the time my bass player brought in a whole bunch of originals that turned out to be literally REM songs with a couple of the chords switched around. I'm still really mad about that. I requested the schematic for the Akai GX210D from Radio Museum, and here's the playback head coming in and hitting a cascading series of transistors in what looks like a preamp EQ stage. Nothing earth-shattering either way, just kind of fun to look at. I do have this really old Roberts 770 reel-to-reel, which is apparently similar to the Akai M8. Totally different model than the 210D. This one's full of tubes, it's never been serviced, but it can play tapes when it feels like it. And I was curious what would happen if I ran a signal into one of its inputs and then captured the preamp output. So that cacophony you heard was a bad example sonically, but you get the idea. There's probably some good sounds to be mined from the preamps of units like these, assuming they're in better shape than mine. And also remember, there was definitely a time when plugging your guitar into your dad's hi-fi unit was a thing. Sorry, Dad. I'm going to accentuate the positive here. This is a neat pedal. It covers a whole lot of ground without getting too busy and silly with the controls, and I can see this being something that I reach for in the not too distant future as a tool to bake a signal a little bit. Or a lot. Curious to hear what you think? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe if this is your kind of thing. I'll catch you on the next one.